So it's still not clear if former President Jacob Zuma and his co-accused, French arms company Thales, will appeal last week's High Court ruling that dismissed their application for a permanent stay of prosecution.
Handing down the ruling on Friday, Judge Jerome Guni said the court found the seriousness of the charges against Zuma outweighed any prejudice which he claimed he would suffer if the trial went ahead. The trial is set down for today at the KwaZulu-Natal High Court in Pietermaritzburg. The fraud, corruption, racketeering and money laundering charges date back to the multi-billion rand arms deal in the 1990s.
So it's a big day for the former President Jacob Zuma. Remember, on Friday, there was this option of appeal. And from Friday, he had about 15 days, I think it's 15 court days in order to appeal.
Yeah.
We would likely to know more about this when he appears in court today.
If that happens or not.
Yeah, so we are hoping to touch base with our reporter Ayanda Mhlongo, who's covering this story for us. Ayanda, a very good morning to you. What are you witnessing this morning? What can we expect as well?
All right, very good morning to you, Blaine, and good morning to our viewers at home. Maybe let's start a little bit, Blaine, with what is happening on the outside of the court. As you know, that last time the supporters of the former president were not able to mobilize because of the time, with the court only announcing on the Wednesday, only giving them 2 days for them to prepare for that judgment as it was handed down on Friday. And this time around, they said they had more days to mobilize support, and saying that they were going to organize many buses from across the province of KwaZulu-Natal, but the majority were going to be coming from the city of Durban. And what I can tell you from my vantage point, Blaine, where I am today, there is a stage that is already being set up. We've seen a few members of the ANC. I see members of the MK. They are here. There's heavy security in and around the court building as well. Those buses, we understand, will be making their way here. But usually, Blaine, by this time, there are crowds already, quite a number of people that would have gathered outside. We're early on speaking to Pastor Vusi Dube, who's one of the organizers of the support for the former president, and he was saying that they were unable to hold a night vigil, and so the supporters would only be making their way to the court from the morning. They're not too sure in terms of the numbers, whether they're going to be able to get the same crowds that we've seen in previous appearances. But as I said, Blaine, we are going to be out here, of course, monitoring what is happening outside the court. But also, very importantly, as you said, all eyes now going to be on the former President Jacob Zuma and what him and his defense team are going to decide. Of course, the Pietermaritzburg High Court on Friday dismissing his permanent stay of prosecution application, and the options that are available now to the former president. Is he going to then make leave to appeal Friday's judgment? Will it be granted by the Pietermaritzburg High Court, or will he have to petition the Supreme Court of Appeal? I'm joined now by our guest and legal expert, Advocate Makosazana Mbonane. Advocate, great to have you, and thank you very much for continuing to stay with us. I think a lot of expectation now is on, all eyes are going to be on the former president. The ball is now in his court in terms of what he is going to do. A lot of speculation, people saying, is he going to appeal, is he not? Take us through what is likely to happen here today.
As you remember, Ayanda, on Friday, the court handed down the decision to dismiss the application for the permanent stay. So, as with any application, he has the option to appeal the decision. So, today, as the holding date for the criminal trial, he's going to have to appear, and if he intends on bringing an application to appeal the decision, he's going to have to declare that as the reason for his postponement, because he's going to have to postpone the criminal trial.
Advocate, I just want to go back a little bit just to recap for the benefit of our viewers who may not have had the opportunity to go through follow what took place on Friday, handing down that judgment by the judges. We know that the former president's case or the application for the permanent stay of prosecution was based on 4 pillars. It was the unreasonable delays. He also questioned why he had not been charged alongside the trial alongside his former financial advisor Shabir Sheikh. There was also the matter of political interference as one of the grounds that they brought forward, as well as pre-trial irregularities. You've had an opportunity now to go through the judgment and looking at what conditions needed to exist for a permanent stay of prosecution application to be granted. Take us through your thoughts on the judgment.
Well, having had sight of the judgment, the court came down to 4 things that it had to look at, and you have correctly pointed out the reasons that were given by the president for the application. But the court will look at the length of the delay, and it will look at the reasons for the delay, whether or not they were systemic, was it the state's fault, and so forth. They will look at the prejudice that is likely to be suffered by the accused, and finally they will weigh what is in the best interest of justice. So in every pillar of everything that we've just set out, the courts found that it could not in good faith find in the applicants and now the accused's favor.
And I know we've been focusing a lot on the former president, of course, and his submissions, or those that were made by his defense team, but also look at his co-accused, the French arms company Thales. Of course, the judgment is also in respect to them. They were also looking at a review. They wanted the court to, in fact, review the decision to recharge alongside the former president, saying that they felt as though they were merely an add-on to this charge. Again, the court there denying them that review.
Yes, so the grounds for the application for permanent stay for the co-accused Thales was that the decision that the NDPP acted ultra vires, that is to say, didn't have the authority to make the decision that he made to reinstate charges. The second, that, as you said, they felt like they were an add-on. And finally, that the decision was in itself irrational, therefore making it susceptible to being set aside on a review. That in its entirety just summed up means that the NDPP did not have the power and could not reinstate the charges, and the court found against them, saying that it was within their powers because they are the head of prosecution, because it is their prerogative, and they made a decision using their discretion.
The court also striking out that new evidence that had been brought forward by Advocate Moses Kakane, representing former President Jacob Zuma, which was a letter that was to further support their submissions of political interference in the matter.
Yes, you'll remember while the hearing of the application was still ongoing, that there was an application by the NDPP, by the National Director of Public Prosecutions, to strike out that evidence that was intended to be brought on. And their reasons for that is that it was brought in the replying affidavit. The replying affidavit means that the applicants have an opportunity to lay out their case, then those who answer, the National Director of Public Prosecution answers, and then the applicants get an opportunity to reply. In the reply, you cannot bring new information or new evidence. If you wish to do so, you make an application. That application was brought and it was dismissed because the court felt, or found correctly so, that it was not going to benefit the court in making the determination that it needed to make.
I know from my vantage point that Blaine will not be able to see what is happening inside the court. I can only see what is happening across the street. But earlier on, we did see the representatives or the defense counsel for the French arms company that's led by Advocate Anton Katz. They are already inside court. We did not yet see the state Advocate Billy Downer, as well as for the defense team representing the former president, Mr. Zuma. Zuma, Advocate Moses Kakane. One would believe that they should already be inside a court, although before court proceedings do start, there is often that moment where the former president does meet with his defense team in one of the holding rooms. But Advocate, just to come back to what we expected inside. Today, it's the start of the criminal trial, of course. And we said that the former president would have 15 days for which to lodge that appeal. So it could not happen today. Therefore, he would then, I would presume, just ask the court for a postponement in order for them to prepare themselves to lodge the appeal.
That is correct, and if he has an intention to bring an appeal of the decision handed down on Friday, he has to make an application for postponement. If the state opposes it, then they would hear arguments on that and the courts would make a ruling. So we could expect, if the intention is to appeal the decision, a very short application today.
What then happens if this court denies him a leave to appeal?
Well, if it does make an application for leave to appeal, the court is going to have to take into consideration that he is within his rights. Right. But if the court does decline or refuses, which is unlikely, the application to postpone the matter, then the trial would have to start today.
Mm-hmm. There's also talk of him possibly petitioning the Supreme Court of Appeal if this court does not grant him that leave to appeal?
Yes, he is within his rights to petition the Supreme Court of Appeal or the Constitutional Court, or successively.
Advocate, to some who might say that once again the former president, if he does lodge this application for leave to appeal, is once again using the courts to drag this matter, to further delay this matter. But then again, those who support him and other legal experts would say he's well within his rights, and this is a legal avenue that is available to him.
Well, and that would be quite correct. He is well within his rights to bring this appeal if he does elect to do so. With regard to whether these are delaying tactics, well, we can't speculate on that. But you remember from the judgment that was handed down that when the spy tapes case was heard in the SCA and the decision to dismiss the decision for the DA versus then NDPP and Zuma, and which resulted in the case being reinstated, they did say that they will use every legal possible avenue to ensure that the prosecution of this matter doesn't begin. So one may draw whatever conclusion they wish to.
There is another point. Obviously, when this application was dismissed, it was dismissed with costs, and I asked the question around the costs because we've already in May, when the matter was heard, the former president, when addressing his supporters, did speak about how costly the cases had been, and saying that he no longer had money. In fact, saying that he had to sell his socks and shoes to be able to pay for his defense teams. Now, that was his explanation when he was speaking to his supporters. In this matter now, if he does take the matter on appeal in relation to the costs, and to speak to us about this type of litigation, how costly is this for him?
Well, to bring an application to the Supreme Court of Appeal or to the Constitutional Court is quite costly. But I suppose it would have to be weighed against whether or not they see prospects of success in that application, because if the trial sits, then you are looking at the matter being set down for 20 or more court days, which would be more costly. So I suppose it should be a balancing act for the defense team, but in terms of costs, that type of litigation is quite costly.
All right. Advocate, thank you so much for your time. Advocate Makhosazana Mbonani, of course, just taking us through and explaining to us what is likely to happen in court here this morning, Blaine. And suppose we've all been eagerly awaiting. In fact, I was just speaking to the former president's protocol officer, Vugile Matabele, to try and get an indication as to whether or not he is indeed going to file that leave to appeal. And he's saying that we'll just have to wait until his attorneys, Mr. Daniel Manja, arrives, as well as Advocate Moses Kakane, and we'll be able to find out from them them whether or not indeed the former president is going to be lodging that application for a leave to appeal. But more and more supporters of the former president arriving. We've seen some leaders of the ANC here in the area of Pietermaritzburg and others coming from Durban and other parts of the province. Also different the structures or the leagues of the ANC. We've seen some members of the ANC Youth League, the Women's League, and I said earlier on, members of the MVA are also here to show their support for the former president. Plain.
I appreciate the clear explanation with regards to the process, because I think that's important for our viewers to understand what's at stake here. And of course, you saying the counsel for Jacob Zuma playing their cards close to their chest. We will find out in a short while if the former president does intend to lodge that appeal at the Pietermaritzburg court, the High Court, the KZN High Court, Pietermaritzburg Division. Ayanda Mhlongo live for us in the KZN capital. Thank you very much indeed. We'll try to catch up with her a little later on.